moving parts. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. It is my fault. Okay, we have. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, now it is my fault. Okay, we have. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, now all right.
There we go. Okay,
I'm on loop,
here.
so hold on.
There we go.
Okay, so you can hear me. Wonderful. Sound is working now.
Okay, so let me start all over again.
You can hear.
Nope.
Okay, so you can hear me. Wonderful. Sound is working now. So let me start all over again.
Nope. Okay, we're gonna try one channel at a time. Okay, we're gonna try one channel at a time. And I'm hearing a loop. And I'm hearing a loop. And I'm hearing a loop. Are you hearing that loop? Am I the only one? Are you hearing that loop? Am I the only one? Are you hearing that loop?
I don't hear a loop. I don't hear a loop. Maybe we should just skip to the video.
Yeah,
Maybe we should just skip to the video.
Okay, I'm turning my
Maybe we
monitor
should just
off
skip to the
to
video.
kill the loop.
Maybe we should just skip to the video.
Okay, I'm turning my
Maybe we should
monitor
just skip
off
to the
to
video.
kill the loop.
Maybe we should just skip to the video.
I'm turning my
Maybe we should
monitor
just
off
skip to the
to
video.
kill the loop. Okay, everybody else is hearing the loop also, so that's okay. Everybody else is hearing the loop also, so that's okay. Everybody else is hearing.
Maybe I should.
I'm gonna go right to the video, and I'm going to go ahead and mute Claudia and myself, and go ahead and mute Claudia and myself, and I'll let the loop end first. Mute Claudia and myself, and I'll let the loop end first. Mute Claudia and myself, and I'll let the loop end first. Mute Claudia and myself, and I'll let the loop end first.
Hi, I'm Claudia Christian, and this year during COVID 2020, I wasn't able to give any speeches, but if I had been able to give a speech anywhere, this would have been it. I want to talk to you about what it's like to have your brain hijacked by a compulsive disorder. My brain was hijacked by alcohol. Over the course of about 20 years of drinking, I learned the behavior of wanting, and in the end, needing alcohol in order to be normal. I used to be an alcoholic, addicted to alcohol. I was alcohol dependent. I had an alcohol use disorder. I used to care what you called me, whether the layman's term of alcoholic or the more politically correct medical term AUD. Now, I could care less. I care about action more than words. Fact, about 80 people will die of alcohol-related causes during this talk. So semantics mean very little in comparison to this crisis. I need to say those words out loud as well because they still provoke shame in me. Even after all these years of talking about my addiction and helping other people with their alcohol misuse, my heart still literally dips when I hear the words I've come to dislike so much. Messy, out of it, drunk, sloppy, alcoholic, alky, undisciplined, weak. Those words still hurt a little part of me, even after over a decade of recovery. Words are incredibly powerful, which is why I'm so incredibly grateful to be able to say that I used to be an alcoholic. Used to be. The past. Before. But not now. Thankfully. I used to have a drinking problem. You know, when I was little, I dreamt of being a writer or an actress or a doctor, not an addict, not an alcoholic, not a drunk. I did not dream of having a substance nearly destroy my life and steal away a good decade of it. No, that wasn't the plan. I'm here today because I found a solution for my drinking problem, the little-known or utilized TSM, short for the Sinclair method, which is targeted use of naltrexone or nalmefene, both opiate antagonists. These medications prevent people from getting reinforcement or reward from alcohol, basically the euphoria that they crave. You take naltrexone an hour before the first drink of the day, nalmefene 2 hours before, every time you drink alcohol, and over the course of a few months, your interest in drinking dissipates and your drinking levels decline. Naltrexone gave me an off button when mine had disappeared, but I could have easily, very easily fallen through the cracks, as so many millions of people are right now. I would venture that the majority of you know at least one person who has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I would then further guess that for the majority of you, it's someone close to you, which makes sense, since about 1 out of 3 adults in countries like the US and UK have an alcohol use disorder. That is a lot of people. For those of you who've never experienced a compulsive disorder of the brain, like addiction, I want to try and paint a picture for you. Let's use sugar for an example. Now, don't get me wrong, sugar addiction can be a debilitating compulsion, but a lot of us say that we're addicted to sugar, even though we're not. We crave it and desire it, yes, but is that truly addiction? Having a late afternoon craving for a sweet is not addiction. Focusing on the dessert menu rather than the appetizers is not an addiction. If you were addicted to sugar, which some people literally are, it would be a mental and physical compulsion. First, you would have to eat sugar 24 hours a day to avoid withdrawal from it. And you'd wake up and eat sugar, and you'd keep sugar on your bedside table so you could eat it throughout the night. You would think about sugar from the time you woke up until the time you went to bed, and you'd probably even dream of sugar. If you were actively using sugar, you would decide where you could go every day by whether or not there was sugar there. You would have a constant supply of sugar everywhere, in your car, your home, your office, your purse, and most likely, you would hide it because it was embarrassing how much sugar you're consuming. If you were trying to abstain from sugar, that would also dictate where you could go because you'd only be comfortable being in places that had no sugar to tempt you. And it would also dictate who you could hang out with based on whether or not they consumed sugar. You would avoid bakeries and supermarkets, restaurants, and movie theaters. You couldn't go to your parents' home because your dad eats cookies and you know where his stash is. You wouldn't be able to get your car washed because they sell candy there at the cash register. You might see where this is going. Sugar's everywhere. So is alcohol. If you're addicted to something, the mental addiction can be as debilitating as the physical addiction. When I was in the height of my disease, and yes, I do use the term disease because it has all the hallmarks of a disease. Alcoholism is progressive and it can kill you, and it's treatable. I couldn't go to a dinner party and focus on conversation because I was too focused on whether or not there was enough wine to go around. Eventually, I learned to bring extra bottles and leave them in my car in case the host ran out. The stress and anxiety of monitoring my drinking so I could appear normal and keeping track of other people's drinking so I could figure out how fast the booze was running out made me completely incapable of being present. I was incapable of engaging in life, friendship, and especially love. Alcohol consumed my thoughts and actions. That is addiction. It is all-consuming. I'm sure you've heard of people gambling away their family home and children's college funds, men and women selling their bodies for a fix, a mother buying vodka instead of food for her baby. These are acts of desperation. These are people so consumed by addiction that nothing matters other than getting the next high or avoiding withdrawal. The more you feed it, the bigger it becomes and the smaller you become until all that's left is a tiny shred of you dying to be heard. Some of us can still hear that voice of reason. I clearly remember myself looking down at myself, buying booze at 7 o'clock in the morning, thinking, what the hell are you doing, Claudia? So a little piece of me was still in there, but others are too far gone to hear the messages from their mind and their body. It is those people I fear for the most. They've lost their essence of self, and that's frightening. Sorry. I didn't know I was going to cry. I'm so sorry. Imagine if you no longer knew who you were or what you were, or even who or what was in control of your body and mind. That is addiction. Losing oneself is the most frightening thing to happen to a person, and addiction is the most talented, wily, and most common thief. In addition to stealing your life force, your creativity, passion, love, health, confidence, looks, relationships, work, and more, addiction also robs you of the one thing human beings crave and need: the love of other human beings. Being an addict usually means that you're left to fend for yourself and that you isolate yourself away from loved ones because you're so filled with shame and self-loathing. You avoid loved ones because you don't want to see the disappointment in their eyes or hear the cruel words, drunk, loser, weak. So you suffer alone or with fellow addicts. Self-acceptance and self-love are imperative for a healthy life. Truly loving yourself is a prerequisite for loving others and for accepting love from others. Happiness begins within yourself and from there extends to those around you. These are things that most of us inherently know, but addiction steals away the ability to perform that one most simple of acts: to love thyself. Some people can get over the guilt and shame of addiction and some cannot. Suicide rates for addicts are substantially higher than for any other group. In the USA, about 120,000 people die of drug and alcohol abuse every year, and about 45,000 die from suicide, the third and 10th leading causes of death in the US, and inherently intertwined. If you're feeling guilty for causing your parents or siblings an incredible amount of stress and worry, maybe even blaming yourself for their cancer, as I did, the thought of ending your life can seem like a punishment you absolutely deserve. Add to that a mind altered by a depressant such as alcohol, and you have a potent mix of danger. Of course, logically, if you killed yourself, you'd be causing your family even more grief, but logic doesn't come into the picture when you're on a downward spiral of substance abuse and self-hate. Addiction is not logical, nor is it reasonable, yet we continue to try to treat it with logic and challenge it with reason. People talk about choice when it comes to addiction. Well, you don't really have to drink, or no one forces you to gamble. But try that logic with a food addict. Yes, people have to eat, but an anorexic would rather die than eat in some cases. Now, that's not logical behavior. A binge eater must eat to survive, but the food is their highly addictive substance. So how can they behave normally around it or try to moderate their consumption when one bite could potentially send them into a binge? Do you tell them not to eat? Once again, addiction is not reasonable nor logical, which is why a person with a compulsive disorder will do the one thing that could potentially kill them or ruin their life. They will continue to crave and use the one substance that can kill them because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. They will continue to starve themselves or throw up their food even when their organs are failing because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. They will drink mouthwash or hairspray until they bleed internally because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. And how do we treat these brain disorders? We try to reason with them by providing talk therapy and fellowship meetings, which can be helpful, don't get me wrong, but, and this is a huge but, we should be offering them science and medication as the first line of defense. In the past decade that I've been working with people who misuse alcohol, I have never met one person, not one, who went to a rehab facility and came out and remained abstinent. Not one. Every single one of them, including me, relapsed after their time in that fake environment, talking our hearts out and being told that we could never touch our substance of choice again or we would die. Not one person got better. In fact, the majority got worse. And this is not funny. Britney Spears or Ben Affleck going in for their 8th round of rehab should not be the fodder of late-night comedians. It is not funny. It is unethical, ineffective, so-called treatment for a deadly disorder of the brain. Would we laugh at someone who had multiple rounds of chemo that were ineffective? Is that funny? The multiple billion-dollar rehab industry is killing people. It is as simple as that. They are charging an exorbitant amount of money for something that simply does not work in the best-case scenario, and something that causes deadly relapses in the worst-case scenario. It is malpractice. It is lawsuit-worthy, but it's simply accepted. Why? Because of the shame and stigma attached to addiction. The multi-billion-dollar rehab industry is preying on the vulnerable and counting on big pharma and the alcohol industry to keep supplying them with clients. No one asks to become addicted to something or compulsive about something. You don't grow up thinking, wow, being physically dependent on ethanol sounds like a hoot. Or gee, throwing up my meals really sounds appealing. But it happens, even to the best of us. The most brilliant, the most sensitive, the most beautiful, intelligent, kind, generous souls, whether good, bad, or indifferent people, addiction does not discriminate. I still recall the first time I overheard somebody referring to me as a drunk. It still punches me in the gut. No matter what you accomplish in life, no matter how good of a person you are, you will always carry the stigma and shame that comes with having been an addict. I've heard loved ones, not strangers, people who loved me, call me wasted, sloppy, high as a kite, a lush, stupid, ugly, and so on. These are the words that we use for someone who's slowly killing themselves in front of our eyes. These are the words we use for our sons and our daughters, our mothers and our fathers. This is what we call ourselves when we're so helpless and so hopeless that we've even given up on the small part of ourselves that remains trapped in the hell of addiction. We shun even ourselves from disgust and disappointment. I think people turn their heads away in disgust when they see a food addict or an intoxicated person because they're frightened. And that's to be expected. You should be frightened. You should be frightened of a brain disorder that changes you into a person who can and will eat 30,000 calories a day, a person who will drink vanilla extract to avoid withdrawal, a person who will sell their body for a fix. Be frightened, but don't judge. There's a very good chance that you or someone you love could end up facing a compulsive disorder at some point. So you'd be better off being informed, educating yourself as to what actually happens to your brain on alcohol or sugar or drugs, and how you can learn the behavior of addiction. Most important, you can learn how to treat it when it happens. Now there are science-based options. There's medications for cravings, for withdrawal, and medications that literally undo addiction in the brain. Instead of fellowship and prayer, there are doctors willing and able to work with people who want to treat their addiction with science. When I started TSM in 2009, there was one doctor, just one, in the entire country in the USA who was offering it to his patients. Now you can find TSM in every state. Clearly, this is not a fad, and clearly it is desperately needed. I know how difficult it can be to deal with someone who has an addiction, a stranglehold which is adversely affecting their life, but I always stress to people that you must treat this person like the patient that they truly are. You wouldn't yell at or speak down to or belittle someone with diabetes or MS. You wouldn't force an individual with cerebral palsy or cancer to hit rock bottom before you'd help them. So I would hope that you would be loving and compassionate and let them know that you love them unconditionally and that you are concerned for their well-being and that you will help them any way that you can to get better. Support and love and patience and kindness can go a long way in helping an individual to get through the hell of addiction. Family and friends can make a huge and positive difference in their life. I have tremendous hope for the future of addiction treatment. There are incredible options coming out in the next few years using opiate antagonists to control or undo a myriad of addictions, but it will take years of education and spreading the word about science-based treatments for it to truly penetrate the most rural communities and to sway doctors to begin offering their patients these life-saving medications. I hope that you do your part to start the conversation about science-based addiction treatment, because options save lives. And now, more than ever, we need as many options as possible. Now that you have an understanding of what it feels like to have your brain hijacked, I hope that you treat those suffering with compassion and understanding. Thank you.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, that should do it.
Hi, can anybody hear? Can anybody hear me?
All right, everybody should be able to hear us now. Okay, there we go.
Anybody here?
Oh, I'm going to turn mine off.
Okay.
So I don't see the chat room. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. Everybody says that they can hear clearly. So, and there's no loop because that was all my fault. The problem with multitasking is this is the first time we have tried to stream to multiple outlets. We are currently streaming through Restream.io onto both Twitch, Twitter, and
Facebook.
No,
okay.
Not on Facebook, but
Oh.
However, what that meant is I was trying to monitor everything all through the same computer that I was broadcasting through. So what that meant was my audio was picking up 5 different streams.
I think you've done a terrific job, Jenny. A terrific job.
So, moral of the story, stop trying to multitask.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Sorry about that little snafu in the beginning, but it was an awfully big job for Jenny to do. And here we are. And I'm glad that you heard the speech, and I'm totally open for questions. So if anybody wants to start the ball rolling.
Yeah, I am monitoring for questions on Twitch, and I am also looking at Twitter. Not really able to monitor the YouTube comments right now, but feel free to get any questions in.
I can see, here's a question from Thorlar. Question, you're amazing and we love you.
Well, the answer is yes.
Thank you. The answer is thank you. That's very, very sweet of you. What you missed in the beginning was me explaining why I wrote this speech, and that was pretty much covered in the speech. It was so that people will hopefully have more compassion and understanding for anyone who's suffering from any sort of compulsive disorder of the brain, any sort of addiction. And I hope that this clarified things a little bit better for someone who's never walked down that road. There's a question here from Avine 2018. Does the Sinclair method work for other addictions, or is it alcohol alone? Actually, that one's for you, Alan. The Sinclair method, targeted use of naltrexone or nalmefene is works very well with gambling. We know that. There is work being done to create a version of naloxone, which is the sister drug. It's also an opiate antagonist for use in eating disorders, but that has not come to the market yet. But currently, yes, you can use naltrexone or nalmefene for gambling and alcohol very successfully.
So there's another question on here. How did you find speaking to your family about being on the Sinclair method?
That was very difficult. Imagine seeing, having your friends and loved ones, family members who are so concerned about you suddenly seeing you drinking. So I did not drink in front of anybody until I had been on it for probably a couple of months. There were a few people very close to me that I admitted it to, and I told them what I was doing, but it was very difficult for them to understand. Neither one of them had ever experienced addiction themselves or in their family or amongst their friends. So they were very distrustful. They thought it was an excuse to drink. This is why I made the film One Little Pill. This is exactly why that documentary exists, to give people an actual film that's less than an hour long that will explain it to their loved ones and their families and friends. It will explain the science behind TSM and show real people on it. It's also why I wrote my most recent book, Journeys. So it's a collection of stories of people who've been on the Sinclair method, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if your loved one is concerned and you want to express to them, you say, this is a treatment I'm going to try, get them the book, show them the film, sit down, watch my TED talk, my TEDx talk with them. There's so much more information now for you to utilize to explain TSM, as opposed to when I started, which there was nothing except my word and Dr. Roy Escapa's seminal book, The Cure for Alcoholism. So you've got a lot more materials to use in your journey.
So here's another question. Do you remember the first time you truly felt, hey, I'm finally free, feeling truly addiction free after you started the treatment?
I do. I have two moments, my aha moments. One I speak about in my TEDx talk, and that was when I drove by this billboard with a big glass of red wine on it that always triggered me to either want to drink or remind myself that I can't drink. I drove by that same billboard about 4 months after starting TSM, and my brain said, oh, there's a billboard. And I literally, as I say in my talk, I pulled over and I started to weep because I realized I was free. My brain processed that information, not as a trigger, not as a memory of drinking, not as a craving. It processed it as a photograph of a glass of wine. And that was profound. The second time I remember going to a party, and I was really, really, always so nervous about taking the pill and being fastidious about waiting the hour. And I went to a party and I had a drink. I got a drink and I just felt so liberating. I can order a drink like a normal person. And I remember forgetting where I put the drink. And that was something that, I mean, never would have happened. I think Anthony Hopkins talks about this in an AA meeting that they recorded and they allowed the public to hear. Is he said the same thing. If you're an alcoholic, you always know where your drink is. It's either in your hand or someplace you put it and you remember where it is. And in this case, I was like, where did I put my drink? Oh, well, I don't really need to finish it. And that was another sort of shocking moment. and I do know the third one. The third one is seeing a half bottle of an open bottle of wine in my refrigerator and thinking, wow, that never would have happened 6 months ago. So all of these things added to that real true understanding that I had reached extinction, as we call it.
So one of the questions that's coming up, and we actually hear this one all the time, so it's not going to surprise you. When you're speaking with somebody who is currently in traditional recovery, what advice how do you approach them, and how would you advise those who are on the Sinclair method of dealing with the situation?
Somebody who's in traditional treatment who, so I'm understanding that the question is somebody who is curious about TSM who's currently in a 12-step program, or how do I talk to a 12?
The second question.
How do
you speak as someone on the Sinclair method? How do you speak to somebody who is in a traditional treatment?
Oh, okay. So this is what I used to tell my friends who were in AA. And by the way, I tried AA, and I have nothing against AA. I do speak very strongly about it because it works for such a small percentage of the people who are doing it and committing to it. And I think there's a lot of negativity. I don't like being called powerless, especially as a woman. I don't like being called a failure. I've already felt like a failure when I had an alcohol problem. So all of those things made me feel very uncomfortable and very weak and vulnerable. So that's my own issue. I have nothing against other people finding joy and happiness doing 12 steps programs. So what I would try to explain to them is that I was not a happy sober person with AA. It didn't work for me because I was still in my addiction. I was a dry drunk. I don't like that expression, but it's true. I was white knuckling every day. I was still mentally obsessed with alcohol, and that was not my choice of life. I could not see myself living for the next 40 years, every day waking up and doing it one day at a time and going to a meeting and calling myself an alcoholic and all that jazz. So it didn't work for me. What I wanted, what I dreamt of, was to get rid of the actual change in my brain, because I could feel it was a palpable feeling that something else was in the driver's seat. And if that happens, that means something changed. And even brain scans show this. Your brain changes when you become an alcoholic. Your neural pathways are so pronounced that they cannot shrink down on themselves. There are some cases, of course, when people have long periods of sobriety where they don't crave. Well, I craved the second I would hit the second or third month. It was unbearable. I had two months of honeymoon period, and then I could not live. I couldn't function because I was only thinking about the fact that I couldn't drink. That's no life. It was no life for me. So what I did with my friends in AA was I would say I needed a medical option. It didn't work for me because I still craved. And by still craving, that means I'm not fixed. I'm still in the disease. So that was my explanation to people in AA. And by the way, you can always say to them, AA's mantra is the only thing you need to attend an AA meeting is the desire to quit drinking. Well, you can use an opiate antagonist to stop drinking. So I don't see anything wrong with somebody taking naltrexone and doing TSM and also attending a 12-step meeting if their goal is abstinence. We all have to work together here, folks. There's too many people suffering to say it's my way or the highway. We have to come together, and you can use anything you want to get better. I don't care if it's grapefruit juice and prayer. I don't really care. Or a boot camp for whatever, or rehab. Use whatever works for you, but keep your mind open when it comes to everybody else. Options save lives, period.
So we've got somebody in the UK who has a therapist background and training, but does not specialize in addictions, and would love to hear you talk about TSM outside of the US.
Well, in the UK, we're seeing a big upkeep. In fact, I believe on this call are Bruce from Recovery Scotland, who's a very good friend, and there are other people who run recovery programs now. Ireland is actually putting their footstep in with Nowplan. We had a wonderful impact with C3 Foundation Europe. There are providers now helping people with accessing the prescription for naltrexone or nalmefene. There's a lot more popping up all over the UK. The problem is that in the beginning, when the NHS was supportive of naltrexone and nalmefene, I don't want to say, it was a kind of they presented this as the anti-binge drinking pill, but the media picked it up there, and we know how tough the UK media can be, as a buzz killer, as the no fun pill. And I think people were turned off by that. The NHS also made the mistake of providing the medication for a very limited amount of time to individuals. And as we know, this is a lifetime commitment. So you can't put somebody on TSM for 3 months, see these remarkable results, and then cut them off from the medication. That's what they were doing. So of course it wasn't going to work. Of course you're going to have somebody who does it for 12 weeks, sees great reduction, and then to the NHS, they thought that was success. You reduced your drinking, so you're free to go. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to take the pill every single time before you drink if you continue to drink. So you need a lifetime prescription if you continue to drink. And I think that was the big downfall. That has now been rectified, and the individuals, Joanna Duivendord from C3 Europe is working directly with other entities and trying to get a much better plan for the UK currently. There are people all over Europe using it. France, I deal with people. I just found a young lady in Zimbabwe who found the medication, believe it or not, because we thought Africa was sort of, it wasn't available, but it is. There's a doctor in Cape Town. Australia is covered, all of Canada is covered, and now all of the US is covered. So TSM is here to stay. And it's just a matter of education. I think all of you know that C3 Foundation is me and Jenny and a handful of volunteers. So if we had 100 employees and $5 million budget every year, guess what? TSM would be a hell of a lot more well-known.
Absolutely. So let's see, what else do we have here? Had Bruce Hodges from RIA chuckling at the grapefruit juice and prayer.
At what?
Chuckling at your grapefruit juice and prayer.
Grapefruit juice and prayer.
We've always said options save lives, and options, if we meant to say TSM saves lives, we would simply say that. But we know that nothing works 100% of the time for 100% of the people. And so we're aware of that, and most of the providers within our networks are also aware of that, and that's the wonderful thing about our current group of providers, we've got international, we're in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., Guam, we've got providers out in Australia, all over Canada, throughout Europe, Mexico, and so most of those providers are also very aware of what other medications are out there as well. And that's a big reason behind why we're doing our upcoming conference. Next June, we're doing a second TSM conference, and we're looking for providers to submit abstracts and presentation proposals for that, because we want to help show the entire world how the Sinclair method works into the options and alongside some options that are already out there.
Yes, and by the way, I want to also address this, and that is that I don't think, other than Dr. Escapa and of course Dr. Sinclair, who's passed, and couple other people, I don't think there's really anybody who's seen the major changes that I have seen in the past decade plus of dealing with people on TSM. And that has shifted my perception of the way these opiate antagonists work. I've learned. It wasn't, and I admit my fallibility. In the beginning, I thought my addiction was 100% biological. And I was completely ignoring the other things that one has to do. So I strongly urge people to not just pop a pill and hope for the best. This is a comprehensive, holistic plan if you do TSM properly. most people don't even know that TSM is a dual therapy, that on your days that you don't drink and take the opiate antagonist, and if you do good endorphin producing activities, you can actually build that part of your brain up to crave good endorphin producing healthy activities and not drinking. So while you're killing one habit, you're creating good new habits. This is something that nobody talked about in the beginning. Nobody also, really encouraged me to keep, I didn't know to keep a drink log. I didn't know to see it, get a decent therapist, any of these things, deal with childhood trauma, all of that stuff that if you add now to your program, it will lead to such a better result. And I've seen that over the past decade. And I've worked with people who, if they just, hope for the best with one medication and they're not doing a comprehensive program, they have most of the time have a less successful outcome. I mean, there are people who only need the medication, but those are unicorns. So it's not just options save lives. It's also whatever it takes to give you the best outcome possible, you should try, whether that's peer support, online meetings, forums, Facebook pages, whether that's journaling or changing your diet and exercise plan. All of that contributes to a really good recovery.
Sorry, I had to mute my...
That's okay.
I had to mute myself because my dog was about ready to talk over you. So let's see if we've got any more questions out there. Questions. Who's got the questions?
Well, if there's no more questions, that's fine. I'm really glad that everybody joined in. I hope you learned something today. As Jenny mentioned, we are doing the conference in June. We always have interesting things going on. So if you're not following us on any of the social media platforms, please do, C3 Foundation. I believe there might be one, is in Sweden, there's been more talk about addiction being biological. Yes, well, there's a huge proponent to it being biological. And if you address that biological part of it, then the person can work on underlying issues if they have them. If they don't have the underlying issue, then guess what? TSM will work for them and they'll be free to go. That's great. I meet people who have really great lives. They had a great childhood. They have a great job. They have a great marriage. They have wonderful children, and they just drink too much. And the pill, compliance, doing TSM correctly fixes them. And that's great. But I'm sure that not every single person in Sweden is a strictly biological addict. There's got to be people who have some sort of other reasons to drink. Everybody's different. I always talk about the snowflake effect. Every single person is different. I cannot do a blanket statement to anybody I'm coaching, for instance. I can't say, oh, this is how TSM is going to work for you, because I have to ask them, when did you start drinking? It's different if you started drinking at 11 and you had this amazing feeling than if you started at 35 after your brain was fully developed. I mean, there's all these little differences that you have to get to know the person and their personal experience before you can make any sort of protocol or plan for them. All of us are different. Everybody drinks differently. Everybody's metabolism is different. Everybody's age is different. So it's really something that has to be customized. And if anybody out there is suffering, just know that there's help. On our website, c3foundation.org, there is so much information for you to do TSM either on your own or to find a comprehensive program through a provider like RIA Health or the other ones that are on our site. You can even coach at yoursinclairmethod.com. I'm available for private coaching. We have other wonderful coaches in the UK that just joined the page, Joanna and Bruce, and we have other ones in the US as well. So there's help out there, unlike when I started in 2009. I was winging it with a book and a prayer.
All right, and I've got one more question here.
Okay.
It says, I come from a family where drinking is glorified, quite often quoting that AA is for quitters. My brother is in serious need of help, but is afraid of being ridiculed. Should he seek traditional assistance? So what options are available to help him learn about the Sinclair method?
Well, this is exciting because your brother can do it privately. He doesn't even have to tell if he's afraid of being called out or made fun of or pressed or pressured to drink or if anybody's going to get in the way of his recovery. He could do TSM on his own. and all of the information he needs, including where to find a provider who will get him the prescription he needs, or a comprehensive program, is available on our website, c3foundation.org. So he doesn't have to so-called come out to everybody. And a lot of the people that I deal with don't want to. They're either in a position of not being able to tell even their spouse, people they live with. So what they do is they follow the TSM protocol outside of the home. That's an extreme situation. But if your brother can do it on his own, then maybe someday when he's comfortable, he can say, well, in case you've noticed I've been drinking less, I took this medication in a targeted manner. I did this thing called TSM, and maybe he can help other people at that point. But the first thing is for him to feel comfortable getting help. And all that means is telling him he doesn't have to quit drinking. This does not involve abstinence or sobriety. It involves harm reduction. And what he really needs to do is get his drinking under control. But he can do that while he's actively drinking. And if you think that he's able to comply, then this could be a perfect treatment for him.
And honestly, having the support of a sibling who has been in that environment and understands that, and being able to offer that family support as well. Again, even though you don't have to make a big announcement out of it, what we have seen over the last, for me, a little bit more than 7.5 years since I've been working with Claudia. With Claudia, it's been well over a decade now, is that the more support a person has, the easier it is for them to reduce how much they're drinking and meet their reduction goals. And it helps eliminate the anxiety of, is this working for me? Am I all alone? But honestly, science has really shown that whenever a person feels supported in what they're doing, they are more likely to succeed at it. The flip side of that is why peer pressure is so detrimental to people, because it's that support to do something that's not necessarily positive. So, but it works in this case as well for positive aspects as well.
Yeah, so true. So you can be your brother's ally in this. Let's see. She thought that people would have difficulty with seeing me drinking again. Yeah, there will be people who, when you're on TSM and you've had a drinking problem, there will be loved ones and friends that will eye you suspiciously. Once again, I go back to One Little Pill. Show them the documentary. It shows you that it's not an excuse to drink. This is a science-based method. There's been many clinical trials. There's tons of information on our website. We even have a website devoted to medical professionals, which is c3foundation.net. So the nonprofit for the individuals.org, and then for medical professionals, it's .net. And that page on its own will give you all of the studies and the protocol and the statements from Dr. Sinclair himself and everything you need to know about TSM. So if somebody's giving you a hard time, say, you know what, why don't you research it first before you judge me? And that's something you can say now, because there's stuff to show them. Back in my day, there was nothing to show them. So now you have everything available to you to do TSM successfully and to explain it to your loved ones.
Okay, I think that looks like it might be it for
Great.
The questions. Last call on questions. Anyone?
I just want to thank everybody again. It's wonderful that all of you came out here on a weekday and joined in on this conversation. The more we talk about it, the less shame, the less stigma will exist. And hopefully someday we can look back and say, wasn't it rough for people back in the day? And, spread the word. That's what I ask of you. Do what we do. If you tell one person, they tell 10 people, and eventually it'll get to the person who needs it the most. This is life-saving information. So tweet about it, Facebook about it, Instagram about it. Just tell people, hey, I saw this talk about this treatment. If anybody's suffering out there, we need to share this life-saving information, because Jenny and I can't do it alone. So be our crusaders for us.
Absolutely. And look for more of these live streams with both question and answers, both live and pre-recorded information. We're going to try to start doing this weekly in either December or just after the first of the year. So we are going to just start debuting all of our video content this way so that those of you who are tuning in can see it first.
And thank you. And I did have one last important question came from Instagram. I've always had a question for people who are able to move past alcoholism. Does the Sinclair method that worked so well for you, meaning me, lead to abstinence or to a healthy social relationship with alcohol? And is the latter even possible for those with this disease? Yes, it is possible. A percentage of individuals choose abstinence, like me. I stopped drinking 2 years ago after doing TSM for 9 years. It was probably a slower process than a lot of people like Katie from Embody Daily, who reached sobriety within a year, or Gary Bell, who's in my documentary, who reached sobriety, I think, in 5 months. Most people start TSM with the goal of harm reduction, with getting their drinking under control, but many of them end up realizing that alcohol is not bringing much to their life. So they just stop drinking, but they stop drinking without any cravings. They don't continue to crave. And by the way, if they choose 2 years later to have a drink, they can, as long as they do TSM. So to answer your question, yes, it works for both people in harm reduction, meaning safe drinking levels, and also for people who want to be abstinent and they are happy in their sobriety like I am. Thanks for your questions, everybody. And thank you for being here. Jenny, you did a marvelous job. I know that it was very stressful. And everybody out there,
with all the audio looping,
it's okay. It worked out in the end.
For anyone who missed the video at the beginning, we'll go ahead and we will run without a Q&A tomorrow, a replay of the video, just the video, and have that available as well, so that is easy to share, just that small bit.
Please share the speech. You know, you never know who it might reach, who needs help. So thank you all again for being here. Thank you, Jenny.